And we're back. We're still here with Keith Smith. So we've talked about a lot of music at this point,
Yeah.
and yet there's still so much more to say. But anyways, with you have a very wide taste in music. Like we were talking about country music earlier, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It seems strange to me. Wow, this isn't a podcast about country music. Anyways, you've got a very wide taste in music. What were I guess I'll rephrase. Where did your musical journey begin? Like, what's your earliest thing
Um,
you remember getting into?
I just loved stuff when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Um, I was gonna say that's how you know it's getting late, right? My first yawn. But the I guess it started with like as funny as this is, uh, my mother always played music in the house,
Hmm.
so there was always all kind, and she listened to a bunch of different stuff, so there was always that.
Hmm.
But also, when I was a kid, um, syndicated TV always had like the Elvis movies and all that stuff on there.
Hmm.
So I would like when I was like 4, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I would watch that stuff, and it was like way over my head. And I thought that like at the time, I thought like Elvis and like Tom Jones and like the Jackson Five were like the coolest shit, right?
Hmm.
And I actually did my first live performance ever was at my uncle and aunt's wedding when I was 4 years old, and by request because they'd heard me sing the song before, and they were like, "He can actually do it." Um, the family had me go up and sing "What's New, Pussycat" with the wedding band, and I
Ah,
ended it by jumping off the stage and sliding up to my grandmother on my knees, like the whole
that's
"whoa,
awesome.
whoa, whoa," you know.
That's awesome.
And I remember it. It's in our family history. It's one of those check marks, you know. But yeah, that my mother was a big influence on getting me into stuff, and then and I listened to a bunch of different stuff, but I can specifically remember one night with my mother and a friend of hers driving somewhere. I don't know where we were going. I know it was nighttime, and we were just about to go on the Mass Ave Bridge and driving past MIT because I remember all that vividly.
Hmm.
And I heard something that changed my musical path forever. And the radio was playing, and all of a sudden it was quiet. And then I heard this riff go, and Whole Lot of Love played. And I'd
Hmm.
never heard anything like that before.
Hmm.
And it changed. After that, I sought out music. I was that kid who was buying records when I was like 7 years old
Oh
and
wow.
asking for records at Christmas when I was like 5 and 6.
Nice.
So, um, yeah, and that just, I loved it. My mother loved that I liked music. So she was always getting me into stuff. And then, once, and then as I got older, it started flipping and I was getting her into bands.
Hmm.
But, yeah, that would probably be where it first started, and Whole Lot of Love was the thing that launched me into heavy music. And then that introduced me just from my digging to Black Sabbath. And when I was a kid, like around 8 like 8 to like 11, even older than that, but 8 is roughly when I remember it starting, right?
Hmm.
There was a group of teenagers that used to hang out in front of the drugstore on the corner by my in my area. And they were always playing really cool music. They used to. It was on a long straight street,
Hmm.
so in the summer times they would drag race muscle cars up and down the street all the time, right?
Hmm.
And they would let me hang out with them. And unlike that, like making fun of you or whatever, they thought I was just a cool kid. So I could hang out with them, and they actually would like kind of check themselves around me because I was a kid.
Right.
But I would basically be their gopher. They'd be like, here's some money, go buy us all smokes and Coca Colas, and you can get yourself some stuff. So I'd run to the store on my bike and buy stuff and come back, you know. And it was in an area of the city where they wouldn't give me shit for being a little kid buying cigarettes. So,
Right.
um, and those kids turned me on to like Black Sabbath and a bunch of different things like that. And T Rex, I
Hmm.
remember was, I mean, I was a little kid, but I loved that music. And yeah, then punk rock happened.
What was
And
your first punk exposure?
um, huh, this is a crazy story, but hear me out. Uh, I was like 12 years old, and I'd met this. My mother worked on this fancy street in town, and so basically, my school was in town, but in the opposite side of Boston. So basically, I would get out of school and then just basically run rampant in the city for like 3 or 4 hours, and
Hmm.
then meet her, and we would go home together, right? And during one of those times, I met this. I saw this punk rock girl in the street, and she was just fascinated. I was fascinated by her, and I walked over and started talking to her, and she was carrying a boombox, right,
Nice.
playing this music I'd never heard before, and it was the Sex Pistols, right? Um, it turns out her name was Alex, and
Hmm.
she was a junkie prostitute,
All right.
right? Um, who warned me of her professions as we were talking. I think she just really needed a friend and was like
Mhm.
probably in a bad way,
Sure.
and happy to have someone to talk to her who didn't want her for those reasons, right?
Right.
Um, and I spent the afternoon hanging out with her. At one point, and I was kind of young and naive, so whatever, right?
Hmm.
But we went to this place in like a more upscale part of town, and she was like, "I have an appointment in here. I have to go in here for like 20 minutes, but I'll come out and then we can hang out for the rest of the day, and I'll take you out for lunch and stuff." So we go to this fancy area, Brownstones, and she goes into this building, and I just sit on the steps for like 20 minutes hanging out, right?
Hmm.
She comes out later. In hindsight, obviously that was a John. She was a call girl, right?
Right.
Um, I didn't catch that so much at the time. Um, and we go downtown, we walk through Boston Commons, and she's just playing the Sex Pistols, and I'm loving it. And she's playing me these other bands, and I'm asking her all about punk rock and her life and things, and she's very candid. I mean, this is a 2 hour story in and of itself, so I'm trying to keep
Sure.
it short. And she just told me about her life and her regrets and how music was the thing that kept her going and stuff. And she was kind of like twitchy at that point. So we go to McDonald's. She buys us a bunch of food and then goes into the bathroom. Didn't realize what this was at the time either, but in hindsight, it's obvious.
Right.
Comes out and then so nonchalantly, and this was like one of the punkest things I'd ever seen in my life because it was so casual that I don't think anybody in the restaurant except me noticed, right?
Hmm.
As she's walking up to our table to sit down, she turns and like those old trash cans they used to have that have like the four open sides in the fast food restaurants where you can just dump stuff in. She looks around, bends over, and pukes into one of those. Right, heroin, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Pukes into that, and then basically comes back up with a napkin, wipes off her face quickly, throws that in there, and then comes down and sits with me. Doesn't say a word until actually after she takes a big sip of Coke and like swallows it and stuff. And then I'm like, okay, and we're just hanging out. And of course, the fact that she'd just seen a John and just shut up did not occur to
Yeah.
me at the time, right? Because I was just like, this is the craziest person I've ever met in my life. And I cannot stress enough, as horrific as this may sound, that she was so sweet and so kind and so genuinely interested in what I had to say and kept it as innocent as she could for me because I was a kid. And we hung out the whole day, walking around talking about music and stuff. And she walked me back to my mother's job, and I was like, "It's really nice meeting you." And she gave me the Sex Pistols cassette,
Mm.
and I said bye, and I never saw her again.
Damn. That's a
And
fucking
after that,
doozy.
I was in love with punk rock. So
Wow, man, what an intro.
yeah,
That's yeah, that's like when's your biopic coming out?
when somebody cares about it. That's another thing that I keep starting to write, but ADD,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
I know how it is.
Called I
Uh,
have this idea for a book called Almost Famous, and I know there's a movie called that, but fuck that anyway. I don't care.
yeah.
Um, or maybe sort of famous, but 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 yeah, I've got so many stories. I always joke that I'm like the Forrest Gump of punk rock. So
And it definitely sounds that way. We've covered Kurt Cobain, we've covered this Alex woman
yeah.
who maybe she's out there. Maybe she's listening.
Sadly, I don't think she is, but it would be wonderful if she was. Because I'll tell you something, if she was still out there, I'd say thank you, and I'd love to like buy her lunch.
Well, if you're out there,
Yeah.
let us know. So I mean, that's music aside, that's an experience.
Oh yeah.
I mean, ignoring the musical aspect, how did that afternoon or that evening
Oh,
affect you for the rest of your life until
uh,
this point at least?
to not judge people. You know what I mean? I was
Hmm.
like, this woman, for all society, would look at her as the dregs, as a horrible piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, she was like the kindest adult. I mean, she was a teenager in hindsight. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But like to me, she was a grown up, right? And and to she was like the kindest, coolest, outside the box person I've ever met. And at like every turn was just I didn't know what was gonna happen next. Do you know what I mean? And and obviously in some cases I think I could have been potentially in a lot of danger. But I think that said, I kind of the way the energy was and stuff and the way it out the day went, I think she was intentionally very discreetly
Hmm.
keeping me safe. Like putting me saying, "Hey, wait here for a second," and then doing some shit. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right. She's not like bringing you into the house with her.
Right, right, right. Or around the corner to do whatever. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Um, and I never saw any of that. And yeah, it kind of set a bar in terms of just like giving people their time and like everybody has a story, you know.
Mm.
After that, I started talking to like homeless guys all the time and stuff like that because I just wanted to know their stories and I met some really cool, brilliant people, you know?
Yeah. I was gonna say if you want a story, the homeless people, the homeless will have it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
in in our current political climate, the year of our Lord 2023, that experience and learning to care about other people and look past their surface level qualities. Just explain to us if you can, why is that important? Because some people don't seem to get it. Why should we want to do that?
A bunch of reasons.
Mhm.
Everybody has their shit. Everybody has their shit. Everybody has their insecurities. Everybody's scared about something, right? But we're all here together, right? And and the sooner you realize that and the sooner you realize like so many people especially nowadays are wrapped up in this bullshit, right? And and worrying about other people as opposed to cleaning their own backyards,
Hmm.
right? And and or as opposed to owning who they really are. You know what I mean? And owning like I I'm trying to figure an eloquent way to say this. But yeah, I think that's what it really is. Like we need to so many people give a shit about what other people are doing with their lives as opposed to giving a shit about other people, right? And
Yeah.
remembering that they're people
Hmm.
and who they fuck doesn't matter. How they see themselves doesn't matter. You know, how they dress doesn't matter. What they listen to doesn't matter. The color of their skin doesn't matter. Where they're from doesn't matter. And if any of that bothers you, that's on you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's the thing. And I think that, again, going back to, I've said this a bunch throughout this whole thing, owning your shit and recognizing it and changing like everybody has biases but but truly good people, recognize them when they're brought to light and try to fix it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think that like yeah, I think that's the stuff, the bottom line of it all to me is that's the thing is if we accepted who we were as people, then you can accept who other people are and you can be yourself, because I think in this world, or at least try to be partly yourself, you know what I mean? But I think in this world, I joke all the time that there's a lot of dentists who want to be cowboys, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of of lawyers who just want to be surfers, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And
Definitely.
I'm doing these drifts on purpose because I think we live in a world where everybody's so wrapped up in doing what they're supposed to do or what they've been told they're supposed to do, that they're not doing what they want to do. And I'm not saying be a hedonist and fuck everybody else. I'm saying try to live your truth as best you can without hurting anybody else. Because if your truth involves hurting other people, fuck you. Like it's like,
Definitely.
you know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
It's like, how selfish is that? And those people, this tragedy of people like that is that they don't realize that they'll never be happy, you know? And
Mm.
the thing that they don't realize the most, and so often they're so close to seeing it, is that they're hating people because they're hating what they see of themselves in those people and what they're afraid that they might be because they were told that those things are bad or that you're not supposed to feel that way, you know? And long story short, before I even met her, for perspective, um, I grew up in Boston with an Irish mom and a black dad.
Mm.
So, and my mom was from Charlestown, which is like notoriously racist.
Mm.
And she had me young and had a black baby in Charlestown. And so that was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So I grew up with that from the gate, you know, and not understanding it until I was like 7 or 8, but being hated for the color of my skin and things like that. And kind of being surprised by that. And it's a point again, a short story. Um, I was my cousin and I were attacked by a group of white kids. My cousin's Irish, but
Mm.
because we were together, he was guilty,
Right.
right? Um, I'll tell the story short and sweet. They were across the street, and I was looking over at them because they looked like cool rock kids, right?
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, those kids are cool," and they're wearing shirts of cool bands, right? And they saw me looking over, and one of them yelled at me, that called me the word, right?
Right.
I knew that was a bad word, but I didn't know what it meant.
Mm.
So I gave him the finger and said, "Your mother's a," and said that word back to him, and they did not like that,
Ah.
and like picked up sticks and ran after us, and we ran and hid in this deli, and the guy behind the deli actually, the first second he was like, "What the fuck are you kids doing here?" And then he saw the kids come in the door looking for us, and he stood there and like covered us. And then as soon as they left, he like let us hang out for a while, gave us some candy and a soda, and then sent us home like 15 minutes later. But we went back to my grandmother's house, and my mother was horrified and saying like, "He can't go out around here anymore," and things like that.
Mm.
And my grandmother, who was a scrappy, chain smoking, classic stereotypical Boston Irish towny mom,
Mhm.
like in the house dress with the slippers, like, "Oh my god, you bastards, come in for supper," like that kind of thing, right? Who could fight? That's the other part. Like literally, she could throw him, right? So, she's sitting there and she says to my mother, "The world's gonna do this to him his whole life. Let him own it.
Mm.
Like he has to see that. What are you gonna shield him from the ugliness of the world? Like he needs, the sooner he understands this, the stronger he's gonna be."
Mm.
And that's another thing that stuck with me through my whole life. But yeah, coming full circle to what you said, that's the thing I feel strongly, is that people need to just worry about themselves, and stop giving a shit about what other people do with their lives. And it's funny because there are the same people who go, well, all I want to do with my life is hate everybody. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of defeated. That's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to say.
Right. There's always going to be those shitheads out
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Like I always
yeah,
joke, I'm like, do I want to be with the group of people who are fucked up, but ideally just want everybody to have food and a place to live? Or do
mhm,
I want to be with the group of people who want to kill everybody they disagree with? Like, it's kind of,
right. It's a tough decision.
yeah. And you don't have to love everybody either, but that's not a reason to just hate everybody, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, I think that's the thesis statement for this whole thing. I feel like everything we've talked about so far just comes back to that own your shit,
Yeah,
purity of purpose. It's like we look at punk rock and music, Nintendo,
right.
uh, all the stuff that you've been through. I think it all really does just come back to that, like know what your thing is, and then like just really go on it.
Right, right, right. And you know what? Because this is important too. It's okay if that thing changes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Anybody who's static breaks.
Hmm.
That's like a thing I learned when I was young from martial arts philosophy and stuff. It's like strong trees break in storms, flexible trees bend, you know? And that's the reality of it. Like I think that there's I'm gonna nerd out here because it was another thing that had a profound effect on me when I was younger. But there was a game called Vampire the Masquerade that was like a
Hmm.
tabletop game. And I got super into that and I was fascinated by this one clan called the Malkavians.
Hmm.
And I was drawn to the fact that their symbol was a broken vanity mirror.
Hmm.
And their credo is basically like reinvent yourself. Like when you look in the mirror, if you don't like what you see, then change it. Like, and they were batshit crazy and stuff like that. But that always resonated with me. That I was just like, anybody who, if you've gone, this is who I am and this is who I'm gonna be, and all those people who are like, I can't change who I am. It's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, really?
Right.
So you've been the same forever? Like, how boring is that? How sad is that? You
Mhm.
haven't expanded in any capacity. You haven't wanted to. You know, if life is a lesson. It's a life is a journey. Yeah, but like it's it. But like so many people are so busy thinking about it that they're not doing it.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
I just got to
Life,
do it.
just do it, like the ad says.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, life is a journey. This interview has also been a journey, but every journey does come to an end at some point. That doesn't mean we can't have you on again because we've got there's there are whole other multi-hour
Yeah.
conversations we can have about kung fu movies. We didn't talk about comic books. I thought we would
Kung
get
fu
there,
movies,
but we
we could
didn't.
talk for hours. Comics, we could talk for hours. We didn't even bring up the fact that I have an extensive Hot Wheels collection.
We didn't even get to the Hot Wheels collection. So those of you at home, you know what you've got in store. We'll be here again, I'm sure. So here we are, Keith Smith of
Thank you.
Anarchy Club, 27 Club, uh, Dead Star Cult,
And,
Type
yep.
66.
Thank you.
Uh, Thanks for coming on the show. This has
And
been
thanks
great.
for having me. It was an honor. Seriously.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it was great talking to you. And nice to finally like talk to you as
Yeah,
opposed to
because
just like,
yeah,
you
we've
know,
been interacting on Twitter for a while.
yeah.
Uh, Links in the doobly doo. Links for all this down in the doobly doo, by the way, because there's a lot of stuff referenced here. So with that, we've got to force close on this, or else we'll be here all night. Uh, Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for everybody who's watching, and we'll
Yeah.
catch you next time.
Take care. Thanks for having me.